It was one of those sweltering Georgia afternoons where the heat clung to everything, making the air thick and suffocating. My two youngest kids, ages 1 and 3, were already exhausted from their doctor's visit, and honestly, so was I. Our pediatrician had recently moved his office to a brand new building, tucked away from the main road, separated from the rest of town by miles of quiet, empty highway. It was supposed to be more convenient for patients traveling in, but today, I was feeling the isolation. By the time I carried the kids out to the parking lot, balancing my bag, a baby bottle, and my purse while trying to wrangle my 3-year-old into his car seat, I was relieved to see only my black Jeep Cherokee remaining. Everyone else had already left, the sun sinking lower as the last of the office staff locked up behind me. I slid into the driver's seat, sighed, and turned the key. Click. I frowned. That was odd. I turned the key again. Click, click. The engine wouldn't turn over. I muttered a curse under my breath, my hands tightening around the steering wheel. The kids were already restless, fussing in the back seat, their small voices rising in impatience. I climbed out, knocked on the office doors until a receptionist let me back in, and used their phone to call a nearby garage. The man I spoke to sounded kind enough, gruff but polite. He said he'd be there as soon as possible, but warned me it might be a while since they were short-staffed. I sighed and thanked him. When I returned to the car, I rolled down the windows to let in some air and tried to keep the kids occupied while we waited. That's when he pulled into the lot. A rusted, old pickup truck crept toward us, its tires crunching against the gravel. I squinted against the setting sun, watching as a middle-aged man climbed out. He was scruffy, dressed in oil-stained jeans and a faded baseball cap, his face lined with sun-weathered wrinkles. He smiled, an easy, almost practiced sort of smile, and nodded toward me. "Evening, ma'am," he called out. "Car trouble?" Relief washed over me. The mechanic. That was fast. "Yes," I said, standing as he approached. "It just won't start. Keeps making a clicking noise." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, then gestured toward my car. "Mind if I take a look under the hood?" "Please," I said, stepping aside. He popped the hood, propped it up, and leaned in, humming to himself as he inspected the engine. I stayed in the driver's seat, keeping an eye on the kids while waiting for his instructions. Minutes passed, then more. It was taking longer than I expected. "Think it's just a loose wire," he finally said. His voice was casual, but something about the way he said it made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. I glanced up at him, but from my angle, I could only see his hands, grimy fingers moving deliberately between the engine components. "Which wire?" I asked. He hesitated. "Come here a sec. I'll show you." I frowned. I had no idea how to fix cars, and I wasn't about to pretend I did. "Oh, that's okay," I said lightly. "Just let me know when I should try the key again." Silence. Then he sighed, shifting his weight. "You really ought to take a look," he said, almost insisting now. "That way, if it ever happens again, you'll know what to do." There was something about his tone that unsettled me. "No offense," I said, laughing nervously, but I wouldn't know what I was looking at. "My husband's the one who deals with all the car stuff." That was a lie. I wasn't even married. His hands stopped moving. The air felt thicker now, the sun sinking lower, stretching the shadows across the parking lot. For the first time, I realized something strange. He hadn't brought any tools with him. Not a toolbox, not jumper cables, nothing. Something cold coiled in my stomach. I watched his fingers flex, then curl into loose fists. His shoulders tensed ever so slightly. Then, just as I was about to speak, another truck pulled into the lot. The sound of approaching tires shattered the heavy silence. I turned my head, my pulse racing. A second pickup, this one marked with the name of the auto shop I had actually called, slowed as it pulled in beside us. A younger man, clean-shaven and wearing an actual mechanic's uniform, climbed out. I barely had time to react before the first man, the one under my hood, slammed it shut. The force of it made me jump. Before I could say a word, he spun on his heel, power-walked to his truck, and drove off. No goodbye. No explanation. Nothing. I was still staring after his retreating truck when the real mechanic approached, looking confused. Ma'am," he said. "Who was that?" I turned to him, my mouth dry. I swallowed. "I thought he was you." His brow furrowed. "You called us, right? About an hour ago." I nodded. "I came as fast as I could," he said. "Got caught up with another job." Then he glanced toward the road. "That guy, he wasn't with us." My stomach twisted. So who the hell was he? The real mechanic shook his head, then popped my hood again. Within seconds, he found the problem, just a dead battery. He reached for his jumper cables, but then he froze. A strange look crossed his face. Slowly, he reached into the engine and pulled something out. A long, thin, rusted object. It took me a second to process what I was looking at. It was a blade, a dagger-like tool, nearly 1.5 feet long. It had small, circular finger holes on one end, almost like surgical shears, but the tip, razor-sharp. It had been placed carefully on top of the engine, like it had just been set there moments ago. "Ma'am," the mechanic's voice was tight. "Is this yours?" I shook my head quickly. I've never seen that before in my life. He turned it over in his hands, inspecting it. The blade was old, rusted, but the edge was gleaming silver, freshly sharpened. A cold shiver ran through me. The man under my hood, he put it there. The real mechanic exhaled sharply, set the blade aside, and got my car running. As I handed him the payment, he looked at me seriously. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I don't know what was about to happen here, but I'm real glad I pulled up when I did." I barely made it home before breaking down in tears. Later that night, I called the police. The officer I spoke to dismissed it, said the blade sounded like specialized surgical shears, which only made it worse. Women have been going missing in Georgia. Some were never found. Others were discovered in pieces. I still don't know what that man was planning. But I do know one thing. If the real mechanic had arrived even 5 minutes later, I don't think I would have made it home. It all started with a simple, friendly hi. I was 14, a shy and awkward freshman, still trying to find my place in high school. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't an outcast either. I hovered somewhere in the middle, making friends easily, especially with people who seemed lonely. That's probably why I noticed him. He sat alone at the back of the classroom during our first anime club meeting, hunched over with his hands stuffed in the pockets of his oversized hoodie. He had messy, unkempt hair and thick glasses that constantly slid down his nose. He looked nervous, uncomfortable. So, being the person I was, I smiled at him and said, "Hi." I should have never spoken to him. At first, it was nothing. He sat near me in club meetings, mumbling a few words whenever I tried to include him in conversations. He was soft-spoken, barely above a whisper, and never made eye contact. I felt bad for him. He seemed harmless, just a socially awkward kid who needed a friend. But soon, things started getting weird. Everywhere I went, he was there. At lunch, he started sitting near me, never speaking, just watching. In the hallways, I'd catch him lingering by my locker. Even when I switched tables in the cafeteria to sit with my best friend, he always found me. It was unsettling. Then he started asking questions. "What classes do you have? What's your favorite color? Do you have a boyfriend?" I tried to be polite, but something about the way he spoke, his voice too soft, too breathy, unsettled me. And then came the notes. Folded up scraps of paper slipped into my locker. They weren't romantic. They weren't threatening. They were just weird. "You looked really pretty today. I like the way you walk. Your hands are small." I started avoiding him. My best friend, Phil, was the first to notice. "That guy creeps me out," he said one day at lunch. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, he's just awkward, though." Phil wasn't convinced. "He follows you around like a lost puppy." "I don't think he's just awkward." I wanted to believe Phil was overreacting. Then, one day, the stalker sat down at our lunch table too close, his knees practically touching mine. Phil had enough. "Dude, she's not interested. Screw off." For the first time, the stalker's expression changed. He looked hurt. Without a word, he got up and shuffled away. I exhaled in relief, thinking that was the end of it. It wasn't. For a while, things were quiet. I saw him occasionally across the cafeteria, in the hallways, sitting alone during club meetings. He never approached me again, but I could feel his eyes on me. Then, my junior year started, and the car appeared. At first, I didn't notice it. It was just an old, beat-up gray sedan parked near mine after school. The lot was big, and plenty of students drove similar junkers. But one day, he was inside it, waiting for me. I froze when I saw him, gripping my car keys tightly. "Hey," he said, barely above a whisper. "Have you been?" I forced a smile. "Good." He didn't move, didn't get out of the car, didn't drive away. Just stared. Something about the way he was so still, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, his eyes wide behind his glasses, made my stomach turn. The next day, the car was there again. Then the next. And the next. I started parking in different spots to avoid him. It didn't matter. The gray sedan always found me. One afternoon, an old childhood friend, Matt, was walking out of school with me. He glanced at the car and frowned. "That guy's always parked next to you," Matt said. "Is he your boyfriend or something?" "No," I said quickly. "I don't even talk to him." Matt narrowed his eyes. Without another word, he marched up to the car, leaned against the driver's side window, and glared at the stalker. I couldn't hear what was said, but whatever it was, it worked. The next day, the gray sedan was gone. I thought I was free. I was wrong. Senior year. I had forgotten about him. I had my license, a car, a job. I was moving forward with my life. Until he followed me home. Phil was in the passenger seat when he noticed it first. Don't freak out, but there's a gray car behind us." I glanced in the rearview mirror. It was him. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe I was just paranoid. So I took a different route. He stayed behind me. Phil turned pale. "Take another turn." I did. The car followed. It wasn't a coincidence. My hands were sweating against the wheel. I slammed my foot on the gas, swerving into a side street, making random turns through the neighborhood. Finally, after several blocks, the gray sedan was gone. We sat there in stunned silence. "He was following you," Phil said. I swallowed hard. "Yeah." After that, I told my mom. She dismissed it, said I was overreacting. But I knew. And I knew he wasn't done with me yet. I started working at a retail store. One day he walked in. I was in the gaming section, organizing shelves, when I heard it. A soft, breathy whisper. "Hey." I turned, and there he was. My stomach dropped. "How'd you know I worked here?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. His lips curled into a small smile. "My friend saw you." I radioed security, but he wasn't doing anything, just standing there, watching. When my coworker walked by and asked for my help in the back, I took the chance to escape. I thought that was it. It wasn't. He came back. Again. And again. His friends started coming, too. A short guy with a phone, always lingering in the aisles, watching me. I tested a theory. I walked randomly through the store. The friend followed. Minutes later, he walked in. I was being tracked. That was the last straw. I ran to security, and this time, they called the police. When he saw the squad car pull up, he bolted. Years passed. I moved away. I got married. I almost forgot about him. Then, one night, leaving work, I heard it. "Hey." He was waiting outside. I gripped my friend's arm, so tight my nails dug into his skin. The stalker smirked. My friend, 6'2", built like a linebacker, stepped in front of me. "What do you want?" For the first time ever, the stalker looked scared. He mumbled something, turned, and got into his car. And then he was gone. I haven't seen him since. But even now, in crowded places, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a gray sedan lurking nearby. It was a Saturday night, a time when most students in my college town were out partying, their laughter and drunken voices echoing through the streets. But I wasn't out drinking. I was at the gym. The building sat on the first floor of my student apartment complex, a small but decent facility with treadmills, weight machines, and a handful of free weights. It wasn't much, but it was convenient, open late, never too crowded. That's why I liked working out at night. By 10 p.m., the gym was almost empty. Just me, my boyfriend, who I'll call A, and maybe one or two other students burning off the stress of midterms. I liked the quiet, the solitude. That night, though, it felt different. I didn't know why, not yet. But looking back, I think my body knew before my mind did. I was standing near the front of the gym, stretching, my reflection visible in the large floor-to-ceiling glass wall that separated us from the hallway outside. That's when I noticed them. Two guys. They walked by slowly, their heads turning as they passed, eyes locked directly on me. I ignored it. College guys could be creepy sometimes, nothing new. But then, a few minutes later, they walked by again. This time, there were more of them. For now, their movements slow, almost too casual. They were watching me. I glanced toward A, who was in another section of the gym, focused on his weights. He hadn't noticed. I turned back toward the glass, pretending to adjust my shoelace, and watched their reflections. They weren't just staring. They were counting. At least, that's what it looked like. They were looking at each other, murmuring something, nodding toward the gym. And then, just like before, they walked away. I tried to brush it off, but then it happened again. This time, instead of walking together, they passed by one at a time. One guy strolled by, his hands in his hoodie pockets. A minute later, another walked past, barely glancing through the glass. Then another. Then another. I felt my heartbeat pick up. This wasn't random. This was planned. I glanced around the gym. The only other student had left a while ago. Now it was just me and A. And them. I exhaled slowly and walked toward A, forcing my voice to stay calm. Hey, have you noticed those guys? He wiped sweat from his brow, raising an eyebrow. What guys? I subtly nodded toward the glass. They keep walking by, staring. A's expression darkened immediately. He was big, 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of presence that made people think twice about messing with him. He glanced toward the hallway just in time to see one of them stop. Not walking this time. Just standing, watching. Neither of us moved. Then, without a word, the guy turned and walked into the bathroom near the gym entrance. And he didn't come back out. Minutes passed. The guy still hadn't left the bathroom. I murmured lowly, "He's waiting for you to leave." A chill ran down my spine. He was right. The gym's main door led directly to the stairwell, which opened out onto a quiet, dimly lit road. If I had left alone, like I usually did, I would have been walking straight into a trap. The guy in the bathroom wasn't just hiding. He was watching, timing me, waiting for me to be alone. I swallowed hard. What do we do? I didn't answer right away. He was thinking, his jaw tight. Then, slowly, he stretched, acting casual, and made a show of putting his weights away. I followed his lead, rolling up my yoga mat, pretending like everything was fine. We waited, and waited. The bathroom door stayed closed, but I had the sickening feeling that if I had left 1 minute earlier, it wouldn't have. 15 minutes passed. The hallway outside was empty. No more guys passing by. No sounds. I checked his phone, then nudged me. We're leaving together. I nodded, shoving my things into my bag. My heart was hammering. We walked toward the door. O was slightly ahead of me, his entire body tense. The hallway outside looked normal, but I knew something was wrong. I pushed open the gym door. And then, the bathroom door creaked open. The guy stepped out. He froze when he saw us standing next to me. His entire demeanor changed. His eyes flicked between us, something calculating flashing across his face. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. Fast. Down the hallway. Out the door. Gone. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. It wasn't just that they had been watching me. It was the way they had done it. The waves of movement. The one-at-a-time rotations. The lingering presence in the bathroom, waiting for the right moment. What would have happened if they hadn't been there? I kept thinking about it. Would the guy have walked out right behind me? Would I have stepped into the stairwell, heard a door click shut behind me, and turned, only to see him blocking the exit? I don't know how many of them were in on it. I don't know what their plan was. But I do know this. They weren't expecting me to have backup. And I am so glad I did. I never went to the gym alone again after that. I never walked through the stairwell without checking behind me. And to this day, when I'm in an unfamiliar place, I always check to see if someone is walking by too many times. Because some people don't just watch. Some people wait. I have always felt safe in my hometown. It's one of those quiet, small cities where people leave their doors unlocked, where neighbors wave to each other from their porches, and where nothing bad ever seems to happen. Or so I thought. I was 16 at the time, a dedicated runner, training for my school's track team. Even in the off-season, I made it a point to run every day, a habit that was so routine, I never thought twice about it. It was December, just a few days before Christmas. The streets were lined with glowing decorations, twinkling lights wrapped around trees and rooftops, creating a false sense of warmth in the cold night air. I was exhausted from a long week of finals, and I almost skipped my run that night. But I told myself, just get through this one, and you can take the whole weekend off. So, I laced up my shoes, stretched, and stepped out the front door. I had no idea I was about to be hunted. My usual running route was familiar, a well-lit path along a main road, weaving through a quiet suburban neighborhood. I had run this route hundreds of times. It was safe, predictable. I knew every turn, every house, every yard. But about a mile in, I veered off into a side neighborhood, a darker, more secluded area, but still close enough to the main road that I never worried. As I turned onto the first street, I noticed a car creeping toward me from the opposite direction. A gray sedan. It was moving unnaturally slow. I shrugged it off, assuming they were looking at Christmas lights or trying to find an address. I gave a polite wave, a habit I had picked up from my dad, who always said being friendly makes you less of a target. The driver didn't wave back. Instead, as I passed, I felt his eyes on me. I told myself I was overthinking it. Then, I turned onto a cul-de-sac, just a short loop to add some distance to my run before heading back home. And when I emerged from the dead-end street, my stomach dropped. The gray sedan was waiting at the entrance. It had turned around. It was facing me, and it wasn't moving. A cold prickle ran down my spine. I forced myself to keep jogging, my heart hammering. I was being paranoid, right? Maybe they had made a wrong turn. Maybe they were using GPS. Maybe. The car started rolling forward. Slow, deliberate, matching my pace. I knew then, this was not a coincidence. I turned my music off, every instinct screaming at me to stay alert. The sedan inched forward, creeping along the curb as I ran. I was nearing an intersection. If I turned left, I could loop back toward the main road, where there would be streetlights, traffic, people. But just as I was about to reach the corner, the car stopped. Completely. Like it was waiting for me to make a move. Panic gripped me. I glanced at the tinted back windows. I couldn't see inside. But suddenly, I noticed something I had missed before. There were people in the back seat. More than one. Shuffling. Moving. Getting ready. I was outnumbered. If they jumped out, grabbed me, I wouldn't stand a chance. I had to lose them. Instead of turning left toward home, I veered sharply right, sprinting full speed through someone's yard. My feet pounded against the frozen grass as I cut across a driveway, jumping over a row of bushes. I landed hard on the pavement and risked a glance over my shoulder. The sedan had sped up. It swerved down the street after me. I felt my chest tighten. I was fast. I was a runner, but a car was faster. I needed to hide. Up ahead, I spotted a large pickup truck parked in a driveway. I made a split-second decision. Ducking low, I slipped behind it, pressing myself against the cold metal of the rear wheel. My breath came in short, silent gasps. I peeked through the truck's tires just as the gray sedan rolled past. It slowed down, its brake lights glowing ominously in the dark. The driver's head turned, scanning the street. Scanning for me. I shrank back, pressing myself deeper into the shadows. Seconds felt like hours. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, the sedan sped up. It rolled through the intersection and turned out of sight. I stayed hidden for another 5 minutes, barely daring to breathe. Finally, when I was sure they were gone, I slipped out from behind the truck, threw my hood over my head, and sprinted home as fast as I had ever run in my life. I barely made it through the front door before locking every single deadbolt. My lungs burned, my hands shook, and I felt like I was going to throw up. But it was over. I was safe. Or so I thought, because as I stood there, catching my breath, headlights flickered through the blinds. I turned slowly, and there it was, the gray sedan, rolling down my street, moving slow, searching. I hit the lights, dropping to the floor. I crawled toward the window, peeking just enough to see. The car had stopped, just a few houses down, right outside my neighbor's driveway. It idled there for what felt like forever. Then, without warning, the back door opened. I held my breath. A shadow shifted inside the car. But before anything could happen, another vehicle turned onto the street. The gray sedan slammed its doors shut and sped away into the night. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told my parents everything. They called the police, but without a plate number, there was nothing they could do. Probably just some guys messing around, the officer said. But I knew better. This wasn't random. This wasn't a prank. I had been hunted. I never ran at night again after that. And to this day, whenever I'm out alone, whether it's day or night, I always check my surroundings. Because some people don't just watch. Some people wait. I was 16 when I first went hunting alone. Where I come from, hunting is a way of life. My dad taught me everything, how to move through the woods without making a sound, how to track deer by the way the leaves were pressed into the soil, how to aim, breathe, and fire with precision. By the time I was a teenager, I was good at it, confident, maybe even a little cocky. But nothing my dad ever taught me prepared me for what happened that day. It was early November, just before dawn, and the world was silent. The air was cold enough that my breath came out in clouds as I made my way to my tree stand, my rifle slung over my shoulder. The woods were thick with fallen leaves, the scent of damp earth filling my lungs. I had been hunting in this area before, so I wasn't worried. I knew these woods like the back of my hand. My stand was nestled high in an old oak tree, about 15 feet up. It gave me the perfect vantage point over the clearing below, a perfect spot for deer. I settled in, adjusting my gloves, my rifle resting across my lap. Then, I waited. I've always loved that part of hunting, the stillness, the quiet. Just me and the forest, listening. But that morning, something felt different. The woods were too quiet. Not a single bird chirped. Not a single branch snapped. Even the wind had died down. At first, I ignored it. Probably just my imagination. Then, about 30 minutes in, I heard it. A crack in the distance. I stiffened, ear straining. Another crack. Closer this time. Someone else was out here. I exhaled slowly, relaxing a little. Other hunters used these woods, it wasn't unusual. But something about this felt off. I lifted my rifle and peered through the scope, scanning the trees. That's when I saw him. A figure, standing at the edge of the clearing. At first, I thought he was another hunter, dressed in dark clothing, standing perfectly still. But as I adjusted my scope, my stomach tightened. He wasn't wearing hunter's orange. That was the first red flag. The second? He was looking right at me. I froze, my finger hovering over the trigger. How did he see me? I was 15 feet up, hidden in the trees, wearing full camo. He shouldn't have known I was there. But somehow he did. He stood there, half hidden in the shadows, his body stiff, his head tilted slightly, like he was studying me. A sick, uneasy feeling crept over me. I lifted my rifle a little higher, looking through the scope, trying to get a better look at his face. And that's when I saw it. The glint of metal. The reflection of a rifle scope. Pointed directly at me. Panic slammed into me like a bullet. He was aiming at me. For a split second, my body locked up, a deer caught in someone else's crosshairs. Then instinct kicked in. I ducked. The second I moved, a shot rang out. A branch exploded just inches from where my head had been. He fired at me. He was trying to kill me. Adrenaline roared through my veins as I scrambled out of the tree stand, gripping my rifle tight. I hit the ground hard, rolling onto my side, my pulse thundering. I needed cover. Now, I bolted, weaving through the trees, trying to put distance between me and whoever the hell that was. Another shot. Bark shattered beside me. I ducked behind a fallen log, gasping for breath. My hands were shaking, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. Who the hell was this guy? And why was he hunting me? I risked a glance over the log. The clearing was empty. The man was gone. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Think. He had a rifle with a scope. That meant distance was my enemy. If I ran into the open, I was dead. I needed to be smart. I needed to get the hell out of there. I moved carefully, crouching low, using the trees as cover. Every few seconds, I stopped, listening. Nothing. Then, a snap to my left. I turned just in time to see him move between the trees. Closer now. He was stalking me. I gripped my rifle, trying to steady my breathing. I had two options. Run, or fight. My dad's voice echoed in my head. You're never defenseless, as long as you've got your wits about you. I clenched my jaw. I would not be hunted. Slowly, I raised my rifle, aiming toward the last place I had seen him. I exhaled. Then, a gunshot exploded through the trees. But it wasn't aimed at me. It came from somewhere else. A split second later, I heard running. The man was leaving. And then, finally, silence. I didn't move. Not for a long time. I stayed low, my finger tight on the trigger, listening for any sign that he was still there. Nothing. After what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to stand. My legs were shaking. My breath came in ragged gasps. I had to get out of the woods. Now, I moved as quickly as I could, my rifle still raised, my eyes darting in every direction. By the time I reached my truck, my hands were trembling so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. The moment the engine roared to life, I sped the hell out of there. I told my dad everything. He didn't doubt me for a second. The next day, he and a few of his buddies went out to the woods to check the area. They found spent shell casings. Not mine. They reported it to the sheriff, but nothing ever came of it. No one knew who the guy was. No one else had seen him. But I knew the truth. Someone had been out there that day. Someone with a rifle. And they weren't hunting deer. They were hunting me. I never went back to that part of the woods again. And to this day, I still get a chill whenever I step outside and feel eyes on me. Because some hunters aren't looking for animals.